Every meaningful change begins with a shift in attention. Progress does not arrive when circumstances magically improve. It arrives when the mind learns to look in a different direction. Life will always present challenges, unexpected setbacks, unanswered questions, and moments of pressure. The real difference between those who move forward and those who remain stuck is not intelligence, luck, or talent. It is where they choose to place their focus. This audiobook is built on a simple but powerful truth. Problems demand awareness, but solutions demand commitment. When attention stays locked on what is wrong, energy drains away. When attention moves toward what can be done next, momentum begins to form. This shift may sound subtle, but it changes how decisions are made, how emotions are handled, and how daily actions are taken. Over time, it reshapes results. In this audiobook, we will explore how to train your mind to stop circling problems and start building answers. Not theoretical answers, not motivational slogans, but practical, usable ways of thinking that lead to real progress. You will learn how to reduce mental noise, separate facts from emotion, and respond to challenges with clarity instead of frustration. You will discover how small actions create forward motion, how calm thinking produces better outcomes, and how consistent habits quietly solve problems before they grow. This is not about pretending difficulties don't exist. It is about refusing to let them dominate your thinking. Problems are a part of life. Stagnation does not have to be. When your focus changes, your behavior changes. When your behavior changes, your direction changes. And when direction changes, results eventually follow. Throughout this audiobook, the tone will remain grounded and practical. The ideas are meant to be applied, not admired. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You only need to learn how to approach each challenge with a solution-oriented mindset. One decision, one action, one step at a time. Progress is not dramatic. It is steady. It is quiet. It is built through repeated choices made with intention. As you listen, allow yourself to let go of unhelpful patterns of thinking and replace them with something stronger, calmer, and more effective. In this audiobook, we will focus on building that mindset together. Not through pressure, but through clarity. Not through force, but through direction. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Stop feeding the problem with your attention. Attention is not neutral. Wherever it goes, energy follows, and whatever receives energy begins to grow. This is one of the most overlooked truths in personal progress. Problems don't become powerful all at once. They become powerful because they are constantly fed with thought, fed with emotion, fed with repeated focus. Long before a problem affects your results, it captures your attention, and once it has your attention, it quietly begins to drain your strength. Think about how problems usually show up in the mind. They repeat themselves. The same thoughts, the same worries, the same conversations replayed over and over. Nothing new is added, yet the mental weight increases. That is not because the problem is growing in reality, but because attention keeps returning to it. The mind believes that constant focus equals control. In truth, constant focus often equals exhaustion. Here is the key shift. Noticing a problem is useful. Dwelling on it is not. Awareness helps you respond. Obsession weakens your ability to act. When attention stays locked on what is wrong, the brain stays in reaction mode. Reaction mode is loud, emotional, and scattered. It asks, "Why is this happening? And what if it gets worse?" These questions feel important, but they rarely move anything forward. Progress begins the moment you interrupt that pattern. The moment you decide, consciously and deliberately, to stop feeding the problem with unnecessary attention. This does not mean denial. It means discipline. It means choosing to observe the problem briefly, clearly, and then redirecting your focus toward what can be influenced. Attention is a resource, like time or money. It must be managed. If you spend all of it staring at obstacles, you will have none left to build solutions. Every problem asks the same silent question: how much of your energy are you willing to give me? The disciplined mind answers, only what is necessary, no more. This shift may feel uncomfortable at first. The mind is used to circling problems as a form of protection. Letting go of that habit can feel like letting go of control. But real control is not found in constant analysis. It is found in intentional direction. You decide what deserves your mental space. You decide what gets repeated. You decide what grows. When a challenge appears, pause, notice it, name it. Then ask yourself a better question. What is the next useful step? Not the perfect step, not the final solution, just the next useful step. The moment your attention moves there, something changes. The body relaxes. The mind sharpens. Energy returns. Over time, this practice becomes powerful. Problems lose their emotional grip. They stop feeling personal and start feeling practical. You no longer wake up thinking about what's wrong. You wake up thinking about what can be done. This is not optimism. It is focus. And focus is strength. Remember this: what you give attention to, you give life to. If you want progress, you must starve the problem of unnecessary focus and feed the solution with intention. You don't overcome challenges by fighting them in your mind all day. You overcome them by directing your attention toward action, again and again, until forward movement becomes your default state. Chapter 2. Separate facts from emotional noise. One of the most common reasons problems feel overwhelming is not because of what is actually happening, but because of what the mind adds to it. The event itself may be simple, even manageable, but the story built around it, fear, assumptions, imagined outcomes, creates weight. This is what we call emotional noise. And until you learn to separate facts from that noise, clarity will always feel just out of reach. A fact is something concrete. It is what exists right now, not what might happen later, not what you fear could happen, not what the mind predicts in its worst moments. Emotional noise, on the other hand, is loud, dramatic, and persuasive. It speaks in extremes. It says things like, "This is a disaster," or "everything is falling apart," or "I'll never recover from this." These statements feel real, but they are interpretations, not facts. The mind is a powerful storyteller. When emotions rise, the story grows bigger. One setback becomes a pattern. One mistake becomes an identity. One delay becomes a dead end. None of that is factual, but when emotions are unchecked, the brain treats them as truth. That is where problems gain unnecessary power. Separating facts from emotional noise is a skill. It requires a pause. Not a long pause, just a moment of awareness. When something goes wrong, instead of immediately reacting, you step back and ask, "What do I actually know for sure right now?" This question alone begins to quiet the noise. It brings you back to the present moment, where solutions live. You may notice that facts are often smaller than you expected. The situation may be uncomfortable, inconvenient, or disappointing, but not catastrophic. Emotional noise exaggerates. It fills in gaps with fear. It assumes outcomes without evidence. When you learn to strip those assumptions away, the problem becomes lighter, clearer, and easier to handle. This does not mean suppressing emotion or pretending you don't feel anything. Emotions are natural signals. They tell you something matters. But signals are not instructions. Feeling anxious does not mean you must panic. Feeling frustrated does not mean you must rush. When you treat emotions as information rather than commands, you regain control. Think of it this way: facts are steady and quiet. Emotional noise is urgent and loud. The louder something feels in your mind, the more likely it needs to be questioned. Calm thinking does not deny difficulty, it simply refuses to dramatize it. And dramatization is what blocks progress. As you practice this separation, something important happens. Your thinking slows down, just enough to become precise. You stop reacting to imagined futures and start responding to present realities. This is where rational action becomes possible. This is where solutions begin to form. A useful habit is to mentally state the facts in simple language. Short sentences, no judgment, no exaggeration, just what is true. When the mind tries to pull you into emotional storytelling, gently return to the facts again. Over time, this repetition retrains your thinking. You become less reactive and more deliberate. This clarity changes how you speak to yourself. Instead of saying, "This is impossible," you say, "This is difficult, but manageable." Instead of "I've failed," you say, "This attempt didn't work." These shifts may sound small, but language shapes perception. Perception shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. When facts lead and emotions follow, decision-making improves. You stop making choices based on fear or urgency and start making choices based on usefulness. You conserve energy. You reduce mental fatigue. You move forward with steadiness instead of panic. Problems thrive in confusion. Solutions thrive in clarity. The more you practice separating facts from emotional noise, the less power problems have over you. They stop feeling personal and start feeling procedural. Something to address, not something to endure. This chapter is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming grounded. Calm does not mean passive. Calm means clear, and clarity is one of the greatest advantages you can develop. When you can see a situation as it truly is, no more, no less, you place yourself in the strongest possible position to act wisely and move forward with confidence. Chapter 3. Ask better questions to find better answers. Every problem you face is shaped by the questions you ask about it. The mind is always answering something. If the question is weak, the answer will be weak. If the question is emotional, the answer will be emotional. And if the question is empowering, the answer begins to move you forward. Progress does not start with answers. It starts with better questions. When challenges appear, the mind often reacts automatically. It asks, "Why is this happening to me?" Or "Why does this always go wrong?" These questions feel natural, but they quietly trap you. They keep attention locked on the past and invite explanations instead of solutions. The brain responds by searching for blame, excuses, or unfairness. None of these produce progress. The problem is not curiosity. The problem is direction. Questions point the mind somewhere. If you point it toward helplessness, it will find evidence of helplessness. If you point it toward action, it will find options. The quality of your inner dialogue determines the quality of your response. A powerful shift happens when you replace why questions with how questions. Why did this happen? Tends to circle endlessly. How can I respond to this? Creates movement. Why am I stuck? Reinforces stagnation. What is one thing I can do right now? Creates momentum. These are not motivational tricks. They are practical tools for thinking. Better questions do not deny difficulty. They accept reality and then look forward. They assume there is something you can influence, even if the situation is not ideal. This assumption alone changes your posture. You stop collapsing inward and start leaning into action. One of the most useful questions you can ask in any difficult moment is simple. What is the next useful step? Not the perfect step, not the final solution, just the next useful one. This question lowers pressure and removes the illusion that everything must be solved at once. The mind relaxes when it knows it only needs to take one step. Another powerful question is, what am I overlooking? Problems often feel impossible because attention has narrowed. When you ask this question, you widen your perspective. You invite creativity instead of panic. You give the mind permission to explore instead of defend. Notice how different these questions feel in the body. Weak questions create tension. Strong questions create clarity. The body responds to direction just as the mind does. When the question shifts, breathing slows, shoulders drop, and thinking becomes sharper. This is not coincidence. The nervous system responds to perceived control. Over time, asking better questions becomes a habit. Instead of spiraling when something goes wrong, you pause. You listen to your internal dialogue. You correct it. You guide it. This is not about being positive. It is about being effective. Questions also shape identity. If you constantly ask, "What's wrong with me?" you train the mind to look for flaws. If you ask, "What skill do I need to develop here?" you train the mind to grow. One leads to self-doubt. The other leads to self-improvement. The difference is subtle, but the long-term impact is enormous. Good questions are calm, grounded, and practical. They assume effort matters. They assume learning is possible. They assume progress is built, not discovered. When you adopt this way of thinking, problems stop feeling like verdicts and start feeling like invitations to think better. This does not mean every answer will be easy or immediate. Some answers take time to reveal themselves. But the right question keeps you moving in the right direction while you wait. It prevents stagnation. It keeps you engaged instead of overwhelmed. As you continue through this audiobook, you will notice a pattern. Each chapter encourages you to shift from reaction to intention, from emotional reflex to deliberate thought. Asking better questions is one of the fastest ways to make that shift. Remember this: the mind always follows the question. Choose questions that lead you toward clarity, responsibility, and action. When you do, better answers begin to appear, not because the world changed, but because your thinking did. Chapter 4. Take responsibility without blaming yourself. Responsibility is often misunderstood. Many people hear the word and immediately associate it with guilt, pressure, or self-criticism. They think responsibility means carrying the weight of everything that has gone wrong. But true responsibility is not a burden. It is a source of power. When understood correctly, responsibility is the moment you reclaim control over your next move. Blame looks backward. Responsibility looks forward. Blame asks, "Whose fault is this?" Responsibility asks, "What can I do from here?" These two mindsets may sound similar, but they lead in completely different directions. Blame drains energy. Responsibility concentrates it. Blame keeps you stuck in explanation. Responsibility moves you into action. Taking responsibility does not mean denying circumstances or pretending everything is your fault. Life is complex. Other people, past decisions, timing, and randomness all play a role. But waiting for perfect fairness before acting only delays progress. Responsibility simply means accepting that, regardless of how things unfolded, your response now matters more than the cause. There is a quiet strength in this mindset. When you stop arguing with reality and start working with it, clarity returns. You no longer need to defend yourself or justify your situation. You focus on what is within your reach. That shift alone reduces mental tension and restores confidence. Self-blame, on the other hand, is disguised helplessness. It sounds productive, but it isn't. Replaying mistakes, criticizing yourself, or mentally punishing yourself does not improve future behavior. It only drains focus. Responsibility is not about shame. It is about choice. It says, I may not control what happened, but I do control what I do next. One of the most powerful moments in personal growth is when you stop asking to be rescued by luck, by motivation, by perfect conditions, and start asking how you can respond more skillfully. This is where maturity begins, not in harsh self-judgment, but in steady self-direction. Responsibility creates clarity. When you accept ownership of your actions, you also gain ownership of your progress. You stop waiting for external permission to change. You no longer need circumstances to improve before you move. You move, and improvement follows. This mindset also builds self-respect. Each time you take responsibility without attacking yourself, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of growth. You learn from mistakes instead of identifying with them. You separate who you are from what happened. This separation is essential. You are not your past decisions. You are the one deciding now. Taking responsibility is not a single decision. It is a daily practice. It shows up in small moments, choosing to adjust instead of complain, choosing to act instead of delay, choosing to learn instead of withdraw. These choices may seem insignificant, but they compound over time. As responsibility becomes habitual, problems begin to feel different. They no longer threaten your identity. They become tasks to address, situations to manage, challenges to navigate. This emotional distance allows you to stay calm and strategic, even under pressure. You may notice that when responsibility increases, excuses fade, not because you are forcing them away, but because they no longer serve a purpose. Excuses protect the ego. Responsibility strengthens it. The more you practice this, the less you need to explain yourself to others or to your own mind. This chapter is not asking you to be harder on yourself. It is asking you to be more honest and more intentional. Compassion and responsibility are not opposites. In fact, they work best together. When you treat yourself with respect and hold yourself accountable, progress becomes sustainable. Remember, this responsibility is the point where power returns to you. Not power over others, not power over the past, but power over your actions, your habits, and your direction. And that kind of power is more than enough to change the course of your life. Chapter 5. Reduce every problem to one clear action. Problems feel heavy when they are undefined. They linger in the mind as large, shapeless concerns with no clear edges. The brain doesn't know where to begin, so it stays in a state of tension. This is why so many people feel overwhelmed even before they take a single step. The weight they feel is not the problem itself. It is the lack of a clear next action. Clarity begins the moment you reduce complexity. Every problem, no matter how large, becomes manageable when it is broken down into something small and concrete. Progress does not require understanding everything at once. It requires knowing what to do next. One clear action is often enough to dissolve the feeling of paralysis. The mind tends to overestimate what must be done and underestimate what can be done now. It looks at the entire distance instead of the next step. This creates pressure and self-doubt. But pressure fades when focus narrows. When attention shifts from solving the whole thing to taking one useful action, momentum begins to build. A clear action is specific. It is something you can do without confusion or preparation. It does not depend on motivation, perfect conditions, or complete certainty. It is something that moves the situation forward, even slightly. And that slight movement matters more than you realize. When you define the next action, the nervous system responds, the body relaxes, the mind sharpens. This happens because clarity restores a sense of control. The brain is no longer trying to solve everything at once. It knows where to direct energy. This is why action often brings relief, even before results appear. Many people wait until they feel confident before they act. In reality, confidence is usually the result of action, not the cause. Taking a small step creates evidence. Evidence creates belief. Belief fuels further action. This cycle only starts when you move, and movement begins with one clear step. Reducing a problem does not mean minimizing its importance. It means organizing your response. Large goals and complex challenges are built from small actions repeated over time. When you focus on the next step, you are not ignoring the bigger picture. You are honoring it by making progress toward it. One useful way to practice this is to ask yourself a simple question whenever you feel stuck. What is the smallest action that would move this forward? Notice how different this feels from asking, "How do I fix everything?" The first question invites movement. The second invites overwhelm. As you build this habit, you will notice that problems lose their emotional charge more quickly. They no longer feel like threats to your identity or future. They feel like tasks. Tasks can be approached, adjusted, and completed. This shift alone can change how you experience daily life. Another important aspect of this practice is acceptance. You accept that progress may be slower than you want, but it will be steady if you keep taking clear actions. You stop rushing yourself and start trusting the process. Clarity replaces urgency. Over time, these small actions compound. What once felt impossible becomes manageable. What once felt overwhelming becomes routine. You begin to trust your ability to handle challenges, not because everything works out perfectly, but because you know how to respond when it doesn't. This chapter is about training yourself to move instead of freeze, to act instead of overthink, to build progress one step at a time. When you reduce every problem to one clear action, you remove the excuse to remain stuck. You give yourself a starting point, and a starting point is all you ever need. Remember, progress is not dramatic. It is practical. It is built through repeated, intentional actions taken with clarity. When you stop asking for perfect plans and start committing to the next step, problems lose their power, and forward motion becomes your new default. Chapter 6. Stop waiting for motivation. Build motion instead. Motivation is often treated like a requirement, as if progress cannot begin without it. Many people wait to feel ready, inspired, or confident before they take action. They tell themselves that once motivation arrives, everything will move smoothly. But motivation is unpredictable. It comes and goes without warning. If progress depends on motivation, progress will always be inconsistent. Motion, on the other hand, is reliable. Motion is created by action, not feeling. When you move, even slightly, you generate energy. The body responds to movement. The mind responds to evidence. This is why action often changes how you feel, while waiting rarely does. The idea that motivation must come first is one of the most common traps in personal growth. It sounds reasonable, but it quietly keeps people stuck. The truth is simpler and more practical. You act first and motivation follows. Not always immediately, but gradually, as momentum builds. Think about how confidence is actually formed. It is not formed through planning or thinking. It is formed through experience. Each time you act despite discomfort, you prove something to yourself. You prove that you are capable of moving forward without perfect conditions. That proof builds confidence, and confidence fuels motivation. Motion also reduces resistance. When you sit still, the mind exaggerates effort and difficulty. When you move, even a little, the task feels more manageable. Resistance fades because you are no longer imagining the work, you are doing it. Action turns abstract fear into concrete experience. This does not mean forcing yourself into massive effort. Motion can be small. A few minutes of focused work. One decision made clearly. One task completed fully. These actions may seem minor, but they break inertia. And inertia is often the real obstacle, not the difficulty of the task itself. When you rely on motion instead of motivation, discipline becomes simpler. You stop negotiating with your feelings. You stop asking whether you feel like doing something. You act because the action aligns with your direction. This removes internal debate and conserves mental energy. There will be days when motivation is absent. That is normal. Progress does not require constant enthusiasm. It requires consistency. Motion allows you to stay consistent, even when emotions fluctuate. You do not need to feel powerful to act powerfully. You only need to begin. Over time, motion creates structure. Structure creates rhythm. Rhythm creates habit. And habits quietly carry you forward, without emotional effort. This is how sustainable progress is built. Not through bursts of inspiration, but through steady movement. You may notice that once you start moving, motivation often appears unexpectedly. It shows up after the first step, not before it. This is why starting is so important. The mind needs evidence before it offers encouragement. Motion provides that evidence. This chapter is an invitation to stop waiting for the perfect emotional state. You do not need confidence to act. You build confidence by acting. You do not need motivation to begin. You generate motivation by moving. When progress becomes tied to motion instead of mood, you regain control. You are no longer at the mercy of how you feel. You become guided by intention, not emotion. This shift alone can change the trajectory of your life. Remember this: waiting drains energy. Motion creates it. The smallest step taken today is more powerful than the strongest intention postponed until tomorrow. Move first. Let motivation catch up. Chapter 7. Learn to stay calm when pressure rises. Pressure has a way of revealing habits you didn't know you had. When things are smooth, it's easy to feel in control. But when deadlines tighten, expectations rise, or uncertainty appears, the mind can quickly shift into urgency and fear. In those moments, calm is not a luxury. It is a skill, and one of the most practical advantages you can develop. Calm does not mean indifference. It does not mean ignoring problems or pretending nothing matters. Calm means steadiness. It means keeping your thinking clear, even when the situation feels intense. Under pressure, the mind naturally wants to speed up, react, and fix everything at once. But speed without clarity leads to mistakes. Calm slows the mind just enough to make better decisions. When pressure rises, the body often reacts first. Breathing becomes shallow, muscles tighten, thoughts race. This physical response is automatic, but how long it lasts depends on how you respond mentally. If you add panic to pressure, the situation doubles in difficulty. If you add calm, you regain control. Calm thinking begins with awareness. The moment you notice tension building, you create space. That space allows you to choose your response instead of being driven by it. You don't need long rituals or perfect conditions. Even a brief pause can interrupt a downward spiral. One of the most important things to understand is that urgency is often an illusion. The mind treats pressure as an emergency, even when it isn't. This leads to rushed decisions and unnecessary stress. Calm thinking challenges that illusion. It asks, what actually needs to be done right now? Often the answer is simpler than the mind suggests. Staying calm also protects your energy. Panic consumes focus. Calm preserves it. When you remain steady, you think more clearly, communicate more effectively, and act with intention. This does not remove difficulty, but it prevents difficulty from multiplying. Calm is not something you wait to feel. It is something you practice. Like any skill, it improves with repetition. Each time you choose to slow down instead of react, you strengthen that ability. Over time, calm becomes your default response, not something you struggle to access. You may notice that calm changes how others respond to you as well. In tense situations, calm stands out. It signals control and confidence. People trust those who remain steady under pressure. This is not about performance, it is about presence. There will be moments when staying calm feels unnatural. That is normal. The goal is not to eliminate emotion, but to prevent emotion from taking over. Calm allows you to feel without being overwhelmed. It keeps you grounded while you navigate difficulty. As you develop this skill, pressure begins to lose its power. Challenges still appear, but they no longer dictate your internal state. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of rush, and those choices compound over time. This chapter is a reminder that calm is strength. In a world that constantly pushes urgency, calm becomes a competitive advantage. It allows you to think clearly, act deliberately, and move forward with confidence, even when the pressure is high. Remember, progress does not require force. It requires clarity, and clarity is most accessible when the mind is calm. Chapter 8. Control what you can, release what you can't. A great deal of mental exhaustion comes from trying to control what was never in your control to begin with. The mind argues with reality, resists uncertainty, and replays situations that cannot be changed. This effort feels productive, but it is not. It drains energy without creating movement. Progress begins when you learn to separate what you can influence from what you cannot, and place your focus accordingly. Control is not about dominance over circumstances, it is about ownership of your response. You may not control outcomes, timing, or the behavior of others, but you always control your effort, your choices, and the direction of your attention. When you focus on these elements, you reclaim power that was previously wasted on frustration. The mind often resists this idea because letting go can feel like giving up. But releasing what you cannot control is not surrender. It is strategy. It is the decision to stop fighting what is fixed and start working with what is flexible. This shift creates relief almost immediately, not because the problem disappears, but because resistance does. When you focus on what you cannot control, anxiety grows. The mind imagines outcomes, predicts worst-case scenarios, and searches for certainty where none exists. When you focus on what you can control, anxiety settles. Action becomes possible. Energy becomes usable. One of the simplest ways to practice this is to pause and ask, what part of this situation is mine to manage? The answer may be small, but it is always present. It might be your preparation, your attitude, your communication, or your persistence. These may not guarantee a specific outcome, but they guarantee progress. Releasing control does not mean becoming passive. It means becoming precise. You stop scattering your energy and start directing it. This precision is what allows steady movement, even in uncertain conditions. You no longer wait for everything to align. You act within the space you have. This practice also builds emotional resilience. When outcomes don't go as planned, you recover faster. You do not collapse into self-doubt or frustration. You evaluate, adjust, and continue. This flexibility is one of the most valuable traits you can develop. Over time, this mindset changes how you experience life. You stop feeling personally attacked by events. You stop taking randomness as a verdict. You understand that effort and outcome are related, but not identical. Your job is to show up fully. The rest unfolds as it will. This does not mean ignoring ambition or lowering standards. It means measuring success by what you control, not by what you cannot guarantee. When effort becomes the standard, confidence stabilizes. You no longer ride emotional highs and lows based on external results. Letting go also creates mental space. Space to think, plan, and act effectively. When the mind is no longer crowded with worry, clarity emerges naturally. Solutions appear more easily because the noise has been reduced. This chapter is an invitation to reclaim your energy, to stop donating attention to uncertainty and redirect it toward action. When you control what you can and release what you can't, life becomes more manageable, not because it is predictable, but because you are prepared. Remember this: peace and progress grow in the same place. They grow where attention is focused on effort, not outcome. When you commit to that focus, you move forward with strength, steadiness, and clarity, regardless of what unfolds around you. Chapter 9. Turn setbacks into useful feedback. Setbacks are often misunderstood. They are treated as evidence of failure, signs of weakness, or proof that something is not meant to work. When this happens, progress slows, not because the setback was severe, but because of the meaning attached to it. In reality, a setback is not a verdict, it is information, and when used correctly, information becomes guidance. Every attempt teaches something, even the ones that don't go as planned. But learning only happens when emotion is separated from evaluation. When disappointment turns into self-judgment, feedback is lost. The mind becomes defensive instead of curious. This is where growth stalls. Turning setbacks into feedback requires a shift in perspective. Instead of asking, "What went wrong with me?" you ask, "What didn't work, and why?" This small change keeps identity intact while allowing learning to occur. You are not the problem. You encountered a problem, and problems can be adjusted. The mind often reacts to setbacks by rushing to conclusions. It assumes patterns too early and predicts outcomes too quickly. One failed attempt becomes, "I'm not good at this." One obstacle becomes, "This always happens." These conclusions feel convincing, but they are emotional shortcuts, not accurate assessments. Feedback thinking slows the process down. It examines the attempt without attaching meaning to the outcome. What was tried? What was missing? What worked better than expected? What can be done differently next time? These questions transform disappointment into direction. When setbacks are treated as feedback, persistence becomes easier. You are no longer pushing blindly. You are adjusting intelligently. This reduces frustration and increases confidence, because each attempt feels purposeful, even when it fails. This mindset also changes how you experience effort. You stop measuring progress by immediate success and start measuring it by learning. Learning compounds. Over time, it sharpens judgment and improves results. This is how expertise is built, through repeated cycles of attempt, feedback, and adjustment. Setbacks also reveal what matters. The discomfort they create highlights areas that require attention, skill, or patience. When you listen to that information, instead of resisting it, improvement follows naturally. You may notice that when setbacks are framed as feedback, emotional recovery becomes faster. You no longer dwell on what happened, you extract the lesson and move on. This prevents small delays from becoming long-term discouragement. This does not mean pretending setbacks don't hurt. Disappointment is natural. The key is not to stay there. Emotion is a moment, learning is a process. When you honor the process, emotion passes without derailing progress. Over time, this approach builds resilience. You become someone who expects challenges and uses them. You stop fearing mistakes because mistakes no longer define you, they refine you. This chapter is a reminder that progress is not linear, it is iterative. Each attempt adds information. Each adjustment brings you closer to what works. When you adopt this mindset, Setbacks lose their sting and gain their value. Remember this: success is not built by avoiding failure. It is built by learning from it. When you turn setbacks into feedback, every experience becomes useful, and nothing is wasted. Chapter 10. Train your mind to look for options, not obstacles. The way the mind scans a situation determines what it finds. When it is trained to look for obstacles, it will always find them. Limitations, risks, reasons to hesitate, they appear quickly and convincingly. But when the mind is trained to look for options, a different set of possibilities emerges. Progress often depends less on circumstances and more on where attention is directed. Obstacle-focused thinking is usually automatic. It develops from past experiences, fear of failure, or a desire to avoid discomfort. The mind believes it is being protective by identifying what could go wrong. But when this habit goes unchecked, it narrows perception. Options disappear, not because they don't exist, but because the mind is not searching for them. Option-focused thinking widens perspective. It does not deny risk or difficulty. It simply refuses to stop at the first barrier. It asks, what else is possible? This question invites creativity and flexibility. It keeps you in motion rather than in judgment. Training the mind to look for options is a deliberate practice. At first, obstacles will still appear automatically. That is normal. The difference is what happens next. Instead of accepting the obstacle as the end of the road, you treat it as a signal to think differently. Obstacles become prompts, not conclusions. When you encounter resistance, pause. Notice the initial thought. It may sound like, this won't work, or there's no way around this. Instead of arguing with it, gently redirect your focus. Ask yourself, if this path is blocked, what are my alternatives? This question shifts the brain from defense to exploration. Option thinking also reduces emotional intensity. When the mind believes there is only one path, pressure increases. When multiple paths are visible, pressure eases. You no longer feel trapped. You feel adaptable. Adaptability is one of the strongest traits you can develop. Over time, this habit changes how you approach challenges. You stop reacting with frustration and start responding with curiosity. Curiosity opens space for learning. Learning creates progress. This cycle becomes self-reinforcing. It's important to understand that option thinking does not guarantee immediate solutions. Sometimes the best option is patience. Sometimes it is preparation. Sometimes it is stepping back temporarily. These are still options. The key is that you are choosing, not surrendering. As this mindset strengthens, you will notice a shift in confidence. Confidence no longer depends on certainty. It depends on trust in your ability to adapt. You don't need to know exactly how things will unfold. You only need to trust that you can respond intelligently as they do. This chapter is about expanding mental range, about teaching the mind to search for movement instead of limitation. When you consistently look for options, obstacles lose their authority. They become part of the terrain, not the end of the journey. Remember this: progress belongs to those who stay flexible. When you train your mind to look for options, you remain in motion, even when the path is unclear. Chapter 11. Build daily habits that solve problems automatically. Many problems feel persistent because they are being handled manually every day. Each time they appear, they demand fresh effort, attention, and willpower. This is exhausting. The solution is not to try harder each time, but to build habits that quietly handle these issues in the background. When habits are in place, progress becomes automatic. A habit is simply a repeated action that no longer requires heavy thinking. It runs on structure instead of emotion. This is why habits are so powerful. They reduce decision fatigue and protect energy. Instead of relying on motivation or memory, you rely on systems that work even on difficult days. Most people underestimate how many problems come from inconsistency, missed deadlines, unmanaged stress, lack of progress. All of these are often symptoms of missing routines. When structure is absent, problems multiply. When structure is present, many problems never appear. Building effective habits begins with simplicity. A habit should be easy to start and clear to follow. The goal is not to overhaul your life overnight, but to create small, reliable actions that compound over time. Consistency matters more than intensity. Habits also shift identity. Each repeated action reinforces a belief about who you are. When you consistently act in alignment with your goals, confidence grows naturally. You don't need to remind yourself that you are capable. You prove it through action. One of the greatest benefits of habits is that they prevent problems before they require attention. When you plan regularly, chaos decreases. When you review your progress consistently, mistakes are caught early. When you maintain routines, stress stays manageable. This is problem solving at its most efficient. Habits free mental space. When basic behaviors are automated, the mind is available for higher level thinking. Creativity improves. Decision-making sharpens. You stop wasting energy on the same issues repeatedly. It's important to remember that habits are not about perfection. They are about reliability. Missing a day does not undo progress. Returning the next day strengthens it. The habit remains intact as long as you return. Over time, habits become a form of self-trust. You know you will show up, regardless of mood. This trust stabilizes emotions and reduces anxiety. You no longer wonder whether progress will happen. You expect it. This chapter is an invitation to shift from reactive problem-solving to proactive design. Instead of fixing the same issues again and again, you design your days to support progress automatically. Remember, this willpower is limited, but systems are not. When you build daily habits that support your direction, problems lose their grip, and progress becomes a natural outcome of how you live. Chapter 12. Use time as a tool, not an excuse. Time is often spoken about as if it were an enemy, something that slips away, runs out, or works against us. But time itself is neutral. It does not create pressure, failure, or delay. What creates those feelings is how time is used, avoided, or misunderstood. When time is treated as an excuse, progress slows. When time is treated as a tool, progress becomes deliberate. Many people say they don't have enough time, when what they often mean is that time has not been directed. Without intention, hours disappear into distraction, reaction, and low-priority activity. This is not a character flaw, it is a design issue. Time fills whatever container you give it. Using time as a tool begins with clarity. You decide what deserves your attention before the day begins, not in the middle of it. This simple shift prevents urgency from hijacking your focus. Instead of reacting to whatever appears loudest, you move according to purpose. Time works best when it is given boundaries. Tasks expand when they are left open-ended. When you assign clear time frames, focus sharpens. The mind engages more fully because it knows what is required and when it ends. This reduces procrastination and increases efficiency. Another important aspect of time mastery is honesty. You look at how time is actually spent, not how you wish it were spent. This is not about judgment. It is about awareness. Awareness allows adjustment. Without it, patterns repeat unnoticed. Using time effectively also requires letting go of the idea that everything must be done at once. Progress is built through sequencing. Some actions matter now, others can wait. When you respect timing, stress decreases and results improve. Time as a tool also means protecting it. Not every request deserves a yes. Not every opportunity deserves attention. When time is treated casually, it is consumed quickly. When it is treated deliberately, it becomes powerful. You may notice that when time is managed with intention, confidence grows. You trust your ability to handle responsibilities. You feel less rushed and more present. This presence improves the quality of your work and your decisions. This chapter is not about rigid schedules or extreme discipline. It is about direction. Time becomes useful when it is aligned with values and goals. Small focused blocks of time used consistently outperform scattered effort over long hours. When time stops being an excuse, accountability increases. You no longer blame lack of progress on circumstances. You look at structure, you adjust, you move forward. Remember this: you don't need more time, you need clearer priorities. When time is treated as a tool, it supports progress instead of standing in its way. Chapter 13. Limit discussion, multiply execution. There is a subtle trap that delays progress more than most people realize: excessive discussion. Talking about plans, explaining intentions, and analyzing ideas can feel productive, but often it replaces the work itself. Words create the illusion of movement. Execution creates actual results. When progress matters, action must take priority over explanation. Discussion has its place. Reflection, planning, and communication are important. But when discussion becomes repetitive, it drains energy. The mind releases a sense of completion simply by talking, which reduces the urgency to act. This is why people can speak passionately about goals for years without making meaningful progress toward them. Execution is quieter. It does not seek validation or approval. It moves forward whether anyone is watching or not. When you shift your focus from discussing what you will do to doing it, momentum builds naturally. Results begin to speak for you. Limiting discussion also protects focus. Every explanation invites opinions. Every opinion invites doubt. When too many voices enter the process, clarity fades. Execution thrives in simplicity. One clear plan, one clear action, followed by another. This does not mean isolating yourself or avoiding collaboration. It means being selective. You share plans with those who support action, not with those who encourage delay. You talk less about potential and more about progress. Over time, this mindset strengthens discipline. You become comfortable working without immediate recognition. You stop needing reassurance before acting. This independence is empowering. It keeps progress steady regardless of external feedback. You may notice that when discussion decreases, confidence increases. Confidence is not built by convincing others. It is built by keeping commitments to yourself. Each completed action reinforces trust in your ability to follow through. Execution also creates clarity. Plans become clearer once action begins. Problems reveal themselves during movement, not during endless analysis. By acting, you gather real information that improves decisions. This chapter is an invitation to simplify, to replace explanation with effort, to trade words for work. When you do, progress accelerates naturally. Remember this: results are the loudest form of communication. When you multiply execution, discussion becomes unnecessary. Chapter 14. Build confidence by solving small problems daily. Confidence is rarely built in dramatic moments. It is not created by sudden breakthroughs or major victories. Real confidence is quieter than that. It is built slowly, through repetition, through follow-through, and through the steady habit of dealing with what needs to be dealt with. At its core, confidence is trust in your ability to respond, and that trust is earned by solving small problems consistently. Many people believe confidence is something you must feel before you act. This belief keeps them waiting. They delay decisions, postpone effort, and avoid challenges until they feel ready. But readiness is not a feeling that appears on its own. It is the result of experience. And experience is built by action, not hesitation. Small problems are the training ground for confidence. They are manageable, low risk, and available every day. Responding to an email you've been avoiding, completing a task you keep postponing, organizing something that has been creating friction. These actions may seem minor, but each one reinforces a powerful message. You can handle things. When small problems go unresolved, they quietly drain energy. They linger in the background, creating tension and self-doubt. Over time, this accumulation weakens confidence, not because the problems are large, but because avoidance becomes a habit. Confidence erodes when action is delayed repeatedly. Solving small problems reverses that pattern. Each resolution clears mental space. Each decision restores momentum. The mind begins to associate action with relief instead of stress. This association is important. It makes future action easier and more natural. Consistency matters more than scale. Solving one small problem every day builds more confidence than solving one large problem occasionally. Daily action reinforces identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who overthinks and start seeing yourself as someone who responds. Identity changes when behavior repeats. This practice also changes how you approach larger challenges. Big problems are often just collections of small ones. When you are accustomed to handling small issues, large challenges feel less intimidating. You don't freeze, you break them down and begin. Confidence shows up as calm engagement, not bravado. Over time, your tolerance for discomfort increases. You become more comfortable making decisions, having conversations, and taking responsibility. Not because you enjoy discomfort, but because you trust your ability to navigate it. That trust is the foundation of confidence. It's important to understand that confidence does not require perfect outcomes. Even when a small action doesn't produce the desired result, the act of engaging still counts. You learn, you adjust, you move forward. Confidence grows from participation, not perfection. This chapter is about reclaiming momentum through daily responsibility, about choosing action over avoidance in small ways that add up. When you consistently solve small problems, you build a quiet strength that carries into every area of life. Remember, this confidence is built, not discovered, and it is built one small deliberate action at a time. Chapter 15. Make solution thinking your permanent identity. Solution thinking is not a technique you use occasionally. It is a way of seeing yourself and your role in the world. When it becomes part of your identity, progress no longer feels forced. It feels natural. You stop switching between motivation and frustration, and begin operating from a steady inner standard. Whatever appears, you will respond constructively. Identity shapes behavior long before effort does. If you see yourself as someone who gets stuck, you hesitate. If you see yourself as someone who solves, you act. This is why lasting change does not come from temporary discipline alone. It comes from redefining who you believe you are when challenges arise. A solution-focused identity begins with repetition. Each time you choose clarity over complaint, action over avoidance, and responsibility over blame, you reinforce that identity. At first, these choices may feel intentional. Over time, they become automatic. You don't debate whether to respond productively. You do it. This identity also changes how you experience problems emotionally. Problems stop feeling personal. They are no longer threats to your worth or intelligence. They are situations to manage. This emotional distance is not detachment. It is maturity. It allows you to stay calm, think clearly, and act effectively. When solution thinking becomes permanent, your internal dialogue shifts. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What does this require from me?" That question is powerful. It positions you as an active participant, rather than a passive observer. It places responsibility where it belongs, on your response. You may notice that this identity brings a sense of stability. External circumstances fluctuate, but your approach remains consistent. This steadiness builds trust in yourself. You know that no matter what arises, you will not collapse into confusion or frustration. You will assess, decide, and move. Solution thinking also improves relationships. When others are emotional or reactive, your calm response creates balance. You become someone others rely on, not because you have all the answers, but because you know how to find them. Presence becomes influence. This mindset does not eliminate difficulty. Life remains complex and unpredictable, but difficulty loses its power to derail you. You stop seeing challenges as interruptions and start seeing them as part of the process. Each problem becomes another opportunity to practice who you have decided to be. Making solution thinking permanent requires commitment, not intensity. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. When you slip into old habits, you notice and correct. This self-correction strengthens the identity rather than weakening it. Over time, this approach becomes self-reinforcing. The more you solve, the more capable you feel. The more capable you feel, the more confidently you act. Confidence fuels action. Action creates results. Results reinforce identity. The cycle continues. This chapter is the culmination of everything you have learned so far. It is not about adding more techniques. It is about integration. Solution thinking becomes the lens through which you approach work, relationships, decisions, and setbacks. Remember this: you do not rise to the level of your intentions. You act in alignment with your identity. When you choose to become a solution builder by default, progress is no longer something you chase. It is something you create, day after day, through who you are and how you respond. Conclusion: progress is not a destination you arrive at one day and stay forever. It is a habit, a way of thinking, a way of responding to life as it actually is, not as you wish it would be. Throughout this audiobook, you have explored a simple but powerful shift, moving your focus away from problems and placing it firmly on solutions. This shift does not eliminate challenges, but it changes how you meet them. Problems will continue to appear. That is not a failure. That is life. What determines your direction is not the presence of problems, but your relationship with them. When problems dominate your attention, they drain your energy. When solutions guide your attention, they restore it. Over time, this difference shapes your confidence, your results, and your sense of control. You have learned how attention feeds outcomes, how clarity reduces emotional noise, how better questions unlock better actions, and how responsibility gives power back to you. You have seen how motion creates motivation, how calm strengthens decision-making, and how releasing what you cannot control frees energy for what truly matters. You have learned to use setbacks as feedback, to look for options instead of obstacles, and to design habits that quietly support progress every day. Most importantly, you have seen that progress is built through consistency, not intensity. Small actions taken regularly shape identity. Each time you respond instead of avoid, each time you act instead of overthink, you reinforce a deeper truth. You are capable of handling what comes next. This audiobook was never about perfection. It was about direction. You do not need to solve everything at once. You only need to keep choosing the next useful step. That choice, repeated daily, changes everything. Over time, it turns effort into momentum, and momentum into confidence. As you move forward, remember that solution thinking is not something you turn on only during difficult moments. It is a way of living, a steady approach to work, relationships, and uncertainty. When it becomes your default, progress stops feeling fragile. You trust yourself, not because life is predictable, but because your response is dependable. There will be days when focus slips and old habits return. That does not undo your progress. Awareness allows correction, Correction strengthens discipline. Discipline builds identity. Simply return to what you know works: clarity, action, and responsibility. The habit of progress is built quietly. No announcements, no dramatic gestures, just consistent choices made with intention. When you commit to being a solution builder, not occasionally, but consistently, you stop waiting for life to improve and start improving your life through how you think and act. Carry this forward with patience and confidence. You do not need to rush. You only need to continue. The power to move forward has always been available to you. Now it is trained, practiced, and ready to be used.